Since 2002, she has worked in schools, juvenile justice facilities, galleries, neighborhoods, and nonprofits to address social justice issues through participatory art making. Her dissertation research focuses on the visual representation of teacher assessment. And Victoria is actually one of the reasons why I'm at the Urban Ed program. She actually was gracious enough to meet me one day, and we spoke about the program, and she encouraged me to apply. So I also wanted to throw that in there. If it wasn't for Victoria, thank you. Welcome, Victoria.
With a bang. Thank you guys so much for inviting me to speak here tonight. This is, such a cool tradition that I think Ophelia started last year, and we didn't have this, 4 years ago, and I think it's a really wonderful way to connect as a community. I know some of your faces from advisory and classes, but I hope to get to know all of you, and I hope that you'll see me and the other alums here in the room, or not alums, but older cohort, not older, but, been there a little while, as resources in the department. So my dissertation research explores the social relations of visuality under neoliberal education. And I'm in my 4th year at the GC here, and to locate myself in the PhD trajectory, I defended my second document and proposal last March when I was 37 weeks pregnant, about to give birth just shortly, a few days later. And I'm beginning data collection for my dissertation research this spring. So I intend to work with a small group of students and teachers around multimedia images of teacher evaluation. We'll be collaborating face-to-face and online through an interactive website, and I'm planning to study the ways that participants use digital images to make sense of their school experiences and broader school discourses, particularly those related to teacher assessment. So I want to begin by saying that I believe that pedagogical images matter. Much of what we know about schools, whether schools are successful, whether they're failing, is constituted in images like films and news media and the growing mass of data generated by the standards-based accountability movement. These images shape public opinions and ideas about education, but they also exert real impact on stakeholders, cultures, and school practices. Pedagogical images reflect and reproduce what happens in schools, but I argue that they also produce new ways of seeing, making sense, and taking action. I want to begin by clarifying what I mean when I talk about images, because as you'll see, I'm intentionally playing with how we think about and classify various forms of visual media. I have to make one caveat. As someone who's interested in visual media, of course I'm slightly frustrated that my images didn't come out quite as planned in the Mac to PC conversion. It just happened, so just FYI. So here I'm playing with the way that we classify images, and I want to argue for a broad and inclusive and also highly specific understanding of images, one that encompasses all kinds of media that are not typically regarded as images, like graphs and charts and web pages, and that honors different media and modalities. My notion of images as visually, technologically, and socially situated resonates with conceptions of discourse, and I argue that images are kinds of discourses, but I refer to them here as images to foreground their visual qualities and processes, and because I believe it's important to take images seriously on their own terms. My dissertation research focuses in on images of teacher evaluation, both dominant official media images like value-added rankings, and counter or unofficial images made by young people. I'm interested in the ways that teachers and students make sense of these images and the way that they operate through the dynamics of surveillance and spectacle. So today I'm going to show you several of the images I'm working with, images that I intend to explore with teachers and youth as I begin my research this spring. They include a set of screenshots here on the left from the Wall Street Journal's Grading the Teacher project, alongside another set of image narratives over here on the right from Wendy Luttrell's longitudinal visual ethnography, Children Framing Childhoods. These two sets of images tell very different stories about teachers teaching and learning. The first series represents a long legal battle over the publicity of value-added teacher measurement, this controversial algorithm for measuring teacher value through student improvement on standardized tests. The journal images take up the grammar of science and data visualization, or infographics, to communicate complex and nuanced information in a simple, straightforward manner, if too simple and straightforward. And these images work to convey the truth or authority of these images through these language, the grammar of data visualization that they take up. For example, visual decisions about color and scale reflect built-in hierarchies that privilege school grades and minimize messages that challenge the certainty of the data, such as the lightly traced margin of error noted on the teacher ratings, which you can see there. The form and content of these representations, decisions about which images and elements to privilege, and how to visually convey the information reflect the dynamics of surveillance and spectacle. The data itself, scores captured over a 5-year period and translated into qualitative assessments ranked from low to high, display intricate processes of surveillance, the disciplinary gaze-based monitoring of teacher performance through the collection and analysis of student test scores. This data is a visual representation of the way that standardization and accountability measures produce surveillance, the seeing and disciplining of the many by the few, and how this surveillance is then imaged through data production. At the same time, the publication of these images in the Wall Street Journal and the graphic design of the data marks them as spectacle. The stylized presentation of the images works to promote a particular view of education and of teachers, a measured and measurable ranking based on objective numerical data. And their publication in a major daily newspaper works to privilege this image of education over the lived experience of schools. The production, publication, and circulation of these images by the Wall Street Journal means that larger groups, theoretically the entire journal's readership, are able to watch smaller ones as a means of control, encouraging or shaming them into particular kinds of values and behaviors like greater emphasis on test prep. In this way, systems of surveillance produce images of accountability, test scores, and teacher ratings, and Spectacle repackages these images for public consumption. The other images communicate very different school dynamics, values, and messages about schooling, teaching, and learning. These image narratives are taken from the first phase of Wendy Luttrell's Children Framing Childhood study, where she engaged a group of 34 5th and 6th graders from Worcester, Massachusetts. The youth, who were mostly working class first or second generation children of color, were invited once in 5th grade and again the following year to take photographs with a disposable camera and to discuss these photographs in small groups. In contrast to the journal images, these are informal, youth-produced snapshots. They're taken with disposable cameras, and they reflect that fuzzy, sort of out-of-focus, off-kilter lighting that the medium shows. So these photos, however, taken together with the young people's explanations, offer a really different view on teachers and teaching, one that's deeply relational and reflects the youth's attention to and value placed on care work and teacher relationships. I wanted to show one of these image narratives, but it doesn't look possible, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. There's an image that comes up here. I think I can get the image to come up, perhaps. No, I don't think I can. but I'll describe it to you, which is basically it's a young woman, or three young women, sixth graders, who are embracing a teacher, and the narrative in the way that the young woman talks about it is she refers to this teacher as being very supportive and talks about how the teacher, she's their health teacher, helps them to negotiate their goals for the next year, and keeps them safe, keeps them out of gangs, and helps them watch out for internet predators. So you can imagine this is a very different kind of picture of what the value of teaching is, what the worth and value of a teacher is, than the kind of test scores and value-added metrics. So care work in this work is reflected in what Jamisha talks about in this video as her teacher helping students to set goals for the next year and stay safe by staying out of gangs. Another student, Janelli, defines her relationship with a favorite teacher in terms of having someone to go to. These diverse and nuanced images of care and of the importance of student-teacher relationships crop up through the broader archive in the way students photograph and speak about teachers and teaching. This emphasis children place on care and relationality draws adult eyes to young people's values and to this often overlooked aspect of teacher practice and teaching value. So why bring these images together? Side by side, they seem almost incommensurate. Their authors' production goals, the organization and scale behind their creation and circulation, the aesthetics and political implications are worlds apart. One group of images was taken by 10 and 11-year-olds with now outdated technology, while the others were developed by a team of experts working with cutting-edge software. One represents the visualization of citywide policy, while the other takes up individual experiences. One circulates semi-privately in children's worlds and in academia, while the other flows publicly through mass media channels. They're certainly not equivalent images, yet in spite of all these differences, they share commonalities. They're both representations of teachers and teaching. They visually depict images of schools and teachers put forward particular ideas about what the practice and outcomes of teaching looks like or should look like. And they each reflect distinct understandings of teacher value, what it means to be a good teacher. So my interest here and in my dissertation research in assembling and comparing this wide spectrum of pedagogical imagery is linked with contemporary practices of mixing and mashup that are typically referred to as remix culture. Like sampling and hip-hop, remix brings unlikely elements together and combines them to create something new. These processes of cultural quoting are as old as art making, but new media scholars argue that remix has become especially important and prevalent today as a result of developments in digital media that facilitate editing, sharing, and reuse. Here, the remixing of radically different images of teachers and teacher value is designed to challenge the way that we see them separately and together. Side by side, their differences come to the fore, and they work to highlight the assumptions, omissions, and values put forward in each. For instance, looking at the journal images next to the youth image narratives exposes the lack of specificity and differentiation in the journal's site, where each school and teacher page looks identical to any other except for the scores. And despite the range of data presented, none of it offers insight into the daily experience of a school or classroom. By engaging the personal stories of the children's images, the absence of this information is made visible on the Grading the Teacher site. And in this way, looking at them together shapes what we see in them separately. These juxtapositions between what I'm calling dominant and counter visualities raise questions about the credibility and function of the images. For example, the journal pages contain multiple caveats as to the data's validity, significant margins of error, and cautions about the disputed nature of the data. Even so, owing to the context in which they're published, their high production values, and the grammars of science and statistics that they take up, the images nonetheless come across as official and fact-based, while on the other hand, the Children Framing Childhood's images, youth photographs, and personal narratives of teacher relationality and care are more likely read as sweet but unreliable anecdotes, stories as opposed to data. Why do we read one set of images as inherently less trustworthy than the other, and what does this say about the spectacle of validity or the dominant regimes of truth that dictate the appearance of teacher assessment? By presenting these contrasting images together here and in my dissertation research, I hope to challenge dominant discourses of school and teacher value and encourage productive and creative reimaginings. Thanks. What's the format? Am I questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I thought maybe we could take some stacks of questions that folks have.
Is this my chair? Should I sit on this hideous chair under?
Either chair.
I'll
Question.
be teeny tiny.
How will your research be affected now that like the Danielson evaluations are coming into play, right? Like the narrative descriptions of teachers based on principal perception.
Yeah, so that's something that I've just
Maria,
been...
can you repeat the question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just asking about how her research will change or take into account the new evaluation systems based on the Danielson framework, which is primarily narrative and based on principal perception.
Right. So this is something I've been trying to get myself familiar with, this new advanced teacher evaluation protocol, and I think that it will play an important role. I've been looking through the DOE site and kind of looking at the way that this new program for teacher evaluation is being talked about and imaged, and I think that I'm hoping that as I gather together with a group of teachers starting in January, we'll be able to reflect and take in these, be able to process as a group kind of some of the visual implications and otherwise other implications of this new framework. But from what I understand, the value-added metric is still pretty central to the way that evaluation takes place in the new system. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the new teacher evaluation system that was legislated in New York, but it's based 60% on observation and 40% on test scores, 20% of which are from the state test scores and 20% are basically decided by the school. But what it looks like is that about 40% will be state test scores for most schools, and actually if you score, this is such a maze, but if you score ineffective in that 40%, if you're ineffective in that 40%, then you're rated as ineffective overall. So the value-added metric has disproportionate power in the way that this is understood, and there's some really interesting, I think, visual and verbal kind of tricks or traps in the way that this is being communicated. So I'm still working, but I think it will be interesting right now. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. The Danielson forces teachers to be culturally responsive in how they approach in teaching their children. So I think it's a good thing because it also causes teachers to be responsible for our kids. But I do think that the teachers don't even know how to really deal with it because most of them are afraid. But I've talked to a lot of teachers, and the ones who do understand it are the ones who read Danielson's books.
Right.
So if you're not reading those books, then you're going to be afraid to really get into it. So if you're going to hook up with teachers, find the ones who have been actually reading the material.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, all of this is happening in such a rush, and I think that the way that schools and teachers are grappling with this and their various familiarity with Danielson, the way that they put these school leadership teams together that will help to determine the school evaluation. That 20% is going to be very much in flux, and again, I'm hoping that having a group coming together will offer a way to process and analyze this thing as it's happening.
Could you talk a little bit about your methodology and how are you choosing your participants?
Yeah, so what my plan right now, and there's still some contingencies that I'm working through, is to offer, there's a lot of NICOR folks in the room, so the New York Collective of Radical Educators, and they have a program called ITAGs, the Inquiry to Action Groups, and these are teacher-facilitated, kind of horizontal, a little bit more of a horizontal structure, professional development groups for teachers. And so I'm planning to lead one of these groups with a group of about 10 teachers in the spring. And we'll be looking together at some of the images that I present. Teachers will be bringing their own images to the table and talking about, and then creating new images. So, yeah, it will be a process. We'll be doing critical media literacy, sort of a critical media literacy framework to look at how these images of teacher evaluation are constructed, looking at the sort of visual components, all of the interests that shape the way they look and the kinds of messages that are conveyed. And then together we'll be trying to reimagine and redesign the way that teacher evaluation is imaged, is communicated visually. And then my hope is to follow one or two of those teachers to do a similar protocol with their students in their classrooms following that.
I see a really great opportunity within the new evaluation system. One of the things that teachers are able to do, as well as administrators, is teachers are able to submit evidence during their evaluation process in their small meetings with administrators throughout the year. And having the opportunity to work with a small group of teachers who are in the midst of this process and talking about kind of critical media literacy and the power of images as an evaluative tool might really reframe the way that teachers select their evidence.
Yeah.
And might really open that conversation within that, and that would be within the 60%, which, you know, as you pointed out, without the test scores, may not matter so much for some teachers, but for others, might be a really powerful tool that they didn't even realize they had to access. And making that connection between the images and their evidence might be for me, as I was thinking about it, is really interesting.
I like the language there too. Evidence is really, it's really kind of interesting.
So we have about 2 more minutes for questions.
So will you be also in some way creating media through your groups with the teachers? I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to be videotaping? What are you going to be doing?
Do you mean in terms of my documentation or in terms?
Yeah.
So my documentation is going to be audio recording and field notes. That's I'm still playing with that a little bit. I just re-listened to my defense from last spring to try to remember what I was thinking, and one of my committee members strongly advised against doing video because of the complication of getting good audio with the video, and to get really good usable video is such an intense investment. So I'm really thinking that part through. But what we'll be doing as a group is doing, the plan is to do sort of the first half of the ITAG, this teacher group will be focused on together kind of learning how to read these images, and then the second half will be bringing in our own images and creating new images. So using photography, using graphic design, retooling infographics, making new images as a group that will be posted online to our common website. Thanks so much, guys.
So as I mentioned before, Professor Pavone is not able to be here with us today. But so we are going to be watching a film called Living Undocumented, High School, College, and Beyond. And the description is, Living Undocumented explores the lives of, of diverse undocumented immigrant youth to illustrate the realities, challenges, and opportunities they face through high school, college, and beyond. It is directed by Tatiana Klein, who is a professor at City College of New York School of Education, and produced by Ben Donnellan. It features 6 dreamers who portray the realities of our nation's immigration system and its impact on undocumented youth. So this is intended for all audiences, but as we're watching it, we kind of want to think about what is the impact of these children's realities on the work that we do within the classroom and also within our research.
When I share my status, people are really surprised, even among other undocumented immigrants. When I tell, for example, co-workers who are undocumented as well, oh, I came when I was 5 months old, they're in shock because I speak English well, or because I went to college, and so forth, and they're just in disbelief. And so, of course, I try to explain to them, well, I came when I was 5 months old, and they're like, oh, you were practically born here. Practically, but that makes a huge difference. Those 5 months make all the difference in my life.
I am an African, I am a Malian, a Muslim, and I am a woman.
I would consider myself a very whitewashed Mexican, because I am very proud to be a Mexican, but at the same time I'm very Americanized, and my values are pretty American. Well, on the cover of Time magazine, here I am, right there. And I remember being at this photo shoot, and we all had to say, what was our identity. And some of us said, oh, I'm South Korean, and I remember just thinking, I'm undocumented American. And this cover says that this cover does say that we are Americans.
Sometimes I consider myself American, but because the country keeps denying me of that right, fully, completely, I am back to not being from here, not being fully Mexican because I'm not there. I don't share a lot of the, things that I'm missing out in back home. So I guess that sometimes I just feel like I'm in that gray area of not knowing what to call myself, but just knowing that I feel that I belong here.
It all began with my father coming here when I was about 3. Then my mother, my brother and I decided to cross the border. Well, my parents decided for us, and my mother found a coyote to smuggle us past the border into the U.S. To me, it was an adventure. Walking through, we crossed to Tijuana. So walking through the valley was like an adventure. Spending a night there was an adventure. We weren't supposed to spend the night there, but because the coyote fell asleep, we missed a ride, so we ended up staying an entire day there.
but to me, it was like child's play. Now I look back and I was thinking, it was like, it must have been terribly alarming and like nerve-wracking for my mom to be there with her 2 kids, and then some strange man, and not know what was going on.
When my mother, my sister, and I crossed, we were in a car, and from what I have been told, we were supposed to be really quiet. Unfortunately, I did not stop crying, but we made it, and so from California or so, we were then transported to New York and reunited with my father.
For some reason, my entire family decided to move to New York. I never really understood why so far and so cold. My dad moved here first, I think like 4 years before us, to like come here and make money and stuff. And then my mom decided that we should all be together, so we all moved over. My family moved to the United States in 1981, so I was about a year old. And they came on student visas, and after about 4 years, those visas expired. And you know, me and my brother were still here. And so by the time I was 5, I became undocumented.
It wasn't until I reached high school or so that I realized that my status was going to hinder me from reaching my goals and my future, pretty much, because I wanted to go to college, and because of my immigration status, I was not able to pursue those things like the rest of my peers.
I went to Stuyvesant High School, and when I was a junior, I wanted to do this hospital residency program. And so I had gone to the hospital, and the hospital wanted my green card for some sort of reason, and I was like, okay, you know what, I'll just go home and get it. And so I went back to my parents' grocery store, and I asked my mom, I said, where's my green card? And then she says, it's at the house. You know, so I went back home to find this mythical, magical green card, right? And of course, I could never find it after searching. And so I called her back and I said, where is it? And she says, well, Jonah, you don't have one. And you can't tell anybody about this either. And I was like, well, what are you talking about?
Usually I don't talk about it. Like, I am shy and ashamed of myself. So I don't talk about it to anybody.
I was never really sure up until I think about 5th grade, where some kids were making jokes in class and I didn't understand it, so I asked my sister and then she explained it to me. She said like, oh, you're not a legal citizen of the country, and I was like, oh, okay. And it didn't really bother me because I was like 5th grade, so I was like, whatever.
I don't identify just as being an undocumented immigrant, but I feel like it is a big part of who I am. And the fact that I am undocumented has made me the person I am today.
There's no profile. There's not like one category of people who like are undocumented students. Like there's just so many of us that you would be surprised. And I don't think people would say I was undocumented just because I was sitting next to them. Like someone sharing my story sometimes, yeah, you don't look undocumented.
Being undocumented is like being in this invisible prison and you're stuck there behind these invisible bars. And then you see what your friends and peers do, and you want to be a part of that, but you're not. I think you're always reminded that you can't vote and you can't drive. The fear of deportation is really scary, because like they could just kick me out and the whole life just changed. I'd have to say the first time I ever went to look for a job, and I walked into this deli and he was like, so do you have working papers? And I was like, oh, well, no, because I explained everything, like, oh, I can give you a job. And it had to be, like, not getting a job, like, solely because of that reason. It had to be one of the most discouraging things. Like, I just went straight home after that.
It's hard enough being the first person in your family going to college, but it makes it 20 times harder when you're the first one and you're undocumented, and there's literally nobody to tell you left from right, or up and down, or what's the process that you're supposed to do as far as college goes.
For a very long time in my life, I was really scared to tell other people about my status as an undocumented immigrant. But later on, I realized that by being open, you feel empowered and you get to share knowledge to other people, because a lot of misconceptions are out there. There's a lot of undocumented students in high schools, and quite frankly, according to statistics, 65,000 immigrants without documents like myself graduate every year. 65,000.
I believe the biggest misconception is that we don't pay taxes. We're here to mooch off the system, and we don't contribute at all. And there's so many of us that pay taxes, income taxes, state taxes. You know, we have an ITIN number, individual tax ID number, which allows us, even if we don't have social security numbers, to pay taxes to the federal government. Not every undocumented immigrant cleans bathrooms and mows lawns. My uncle actually works as like a manager of a plant, and my dad has his own little business where he does like handiwork and stuff, and he's very skilled. Well, I believe that a lot of people think it's just a Latino issue, a Mexican issue, and I'm proof that it's not. And so when you have all these people who are from Asia, from Europe, and from Africa as well, it's a global issue that affects all of us.
I get a kick out of hearing the reactions that people tell me, because they usually go, "Oh, where are you from?" "Well, what do you mean?" "Where are you from?" It's like, "Oh, I'm Mexican." "Oh, you're Mexican? Oh, you don't look Mexican." Not that I don't know what a Mexican's supposed to look like, but that's usually how it goes. They go be like, "Oh yeah, I'm undocumented." "No, you're not." I'm like, "Yes, I am."
Some of them kind of assume that I am undocumented once they find out that I am Mexican. It's like, oh, okay, you know, you're Mexican. So of course you have to be undocumented.
I told my situation to one of my college supervisors, and she was more than helpful and everything, but I own an iPad, and I found it really funny that she related, she's like, "You're undocumented, but you own an iPad."
I think that as teachers and guidance counselors, they should always have high standards for all students, regardless of their immigration status. So I know that many times we don't feel comfortable sharing our immigration status for fear, for shame, for different reasons. However, as guidance counselors and as teachers, our jobs, or their jobs, is to provide the information. And right now in New York, there's a lot of immigrants in New York, right? So why not look for those resources and provide them to all your students? Everyone should have access to education, and here in New York we also have the chance to have access to that education. In state tuition, we are able to go to SUNY and CUNY colleges, even some private colleges as well, a privilege that many other students in other states don't have.
I would suggest to get involved in any community service projects that they can get in, because quite frankly a lot of private scholarships reward students for such involvement.